Welcome everyone to the second mentor panel. Uh, we have all new mentors here. For those of you unaware, what we're going to be doing today is we have 4 of our mentors here that all work in engineering jobs, and we're going to be asking them some questions to gain deeper insight into what working in the STEM field feels like. So first question, we're just going to go around with introductions, your name, and a brief description of your job. Mr. Falkenburg, since you're unmuted, do you want to start?
Certainly. My name's Dave Falkenburg. I work at Apple, and I've been a mentor with 2813 for, I think, 3 years.
Cool. Mr. Nomi, do you want to go next?
Sure. My name is Glenn Nomi. So I've been a mentor with 2813, probably about the same time as Dave, maybe a little bit less, something like that. And as I mentioned just briefly, I'm in the process. Actually, I have switched jobs. Started this week at Google. Before that, I was at Western Digital.
Cool. Mr. Clark?
Thanks, Yuta. I'm Bob Clark. I'm a software engineer at Apple currently, and I've been a mentor. This is my 4th year, I guess.
And finally, Mr. Daney.
Yeah, hey everybody. I'm David Daney. I'm Lucas's dad. I work as a software engineer. Currently, I am at a startup called Fungible. Been there about a little over a year, about a year and not quite a year and a half now. And so, yeah, I think that answers the question.
Okay, now that introductions are done, we're going to get to the questions. The first question is going to be, why did you choose your job? Mr. Nomi, do you want to go?
Yeah, so you stopped for a second there, but I think the question was, why did you choose your job, right? So,
yeah, sorry.
No, I think it's probably on my end. We got a bunch of people doing different things in our house right now. A little bit, let me give you a little bit more background about what my role is. I'm in operations program management. So basically from a high level, anything and everything that has to do with operations, me or my team, previously when I was at Western Digital, I had a team. I'm now moved over to Google as an individual, but basically we work to make sure anything operations related gets taken care of. So that involves working with the factories, working to make sure that the bill of materials is set correctly, working to make sure that our supply chain is set up, all that type of thing. So to give you a little bit of more background on kind of my history, so I started off in mechanical engineering. I used to be in automotive. I used to design bumpers on the Dodge Ram, as long as some other exterior components, that type of thing. But I kind of found that the operations program management fits better into what I like to do, kind of keeping the glue together, making sure everything gets taken care of, really kind of making sure anything from an operations standpoint gets done. So it's kind of the organization, but also using that technical knowledge so I can speak, because I have an engineering degree. I can speak with the engineers, maybe not to the level that the engineers are at, but from a high level, I can understand what's going on and how that applies to operations.
That sounds really cool. Mr. Clark, do you want to go next?
Yeah, thank you. I've working as a software engineer, and what really kind of originally got my juices going about that is that work that I do, work that software engineers do, can very easily impact thousands or millions of people, and what I've found is being in the media space, which I've been in for my last several positions, that lets end users leverage story, creating stories or sharing their messages, and that is, I don't know, that's really kind of gets me excited, I guess.
Mr. Daney?
Sure. I guess ever since I was really in like middle school or high school, I was just really been interested in I guess computers, you would say, and electrical things in general. And maybe why did I choose my job? Maybe it's a little more selfish than some of the other people have said, but it's just I just find it enjoyable and kind of fascinating to work with these things. So I was thinking, we saw these questions a few days ago, and I've been thinking about some of them, and I was just thinking that it's like in many ways I've been doing it a long time, but I'm definitely a hands-on individual like contributor guy, and in many ways it's kind of like the robotics club. It's just to get to go in and just do cool stuff all the time, and I really enjoy that.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't think that's selfish at all. I mean, we all we spend enough hours at work. We want to enjoy what we're doing. So
yeah, well, I mean, Mr. Clark said that, I don't want to put words into his mouth, but he said that, he like thinks how cool it is, or whatever his wording was, to like do things that like allow other people to do stuff. And for me, it's just like, I find it interesting personally. So that's why I like to do it.
Oh, yeah. Both good reasons.
You like your job, right? Right, Mr. Clark?
Yeah, I really do like my job. And that's, I mean, there are so many things that kind of fold in on what makes this a satisfying career and a satisfying job. And that's part of it. And it's not like I'm self-sacrificing. I mean, I get a lot of fulfillment out of what I do day to day too.
Yeah, definitely.
Finally, Mr. Falkenburg.
All right, somebody has to unmute him.
No, sorry, it's a habit of putting myself on mute. So I was about as old as everybody in the robotics team now, maybe a little younger, when I learned how to program. I went to a computer camp, and unlike people who just like programming, I liked writing programs that changed the physical world. We didn't have FIRST Robotics when I was a kid, so when I was 17 years old, I got to build a turtle robot with one of my dad's graduate students, and I had my Apple II plugged in with a circuit board that I designed, and driving a robot around under a program control. And it was like I was, on top of the world. I've always been between hardware and software. I have spent almost 3 decades working at Apple. I came in the 90s and have been through all different flavors of the company: good, bad, ugly, super successful, super small, super big, not so fun, lots of fun. And I've worked either in the hardware division or the software division. And that same desire to write code that wiggles things in the real world has always been there. I worked on one of the first, when USB was just 3 letters together, I got a chance to work on it back in 1998, and I've been involved with a lot of things. I was super lucky and got to be on the iPhone team, so that was crazy. A little more intense than FIRST Robotics, but FIRST Robotics and build season are a pretty good prep for working on crazy, innovative things.
Wait, can I just ask, what's a turtle robot?
A turtle robot. Oh boy, see, you guys don't remember, but a turtle robot is a robot that usually has 2 wheels, and so the idea is you can drive the robot forward, backward, you can rotate it. There was a programming language that was invented in either the late 60s or the early 1970s called Logo. And in order to teach graphics, they invented something called Turtle Graphics. And the next step beyond drawing on the screen, you think about it like you're programming a turtle robot, is go forward so many clicks. Okay, and then by running one motor one direction at a certain speed and another motor the other direction, you can make it rotate. And so this was what, so I basically wrote a program that controlled 2 stepper motors, because those are the kind of motors that are inside of printers and other electronic equipment, and some of the old like audio animatronics. You have to tell it to move like 1.8 degrees, 1.8 degrees, 1.8 degrees. So yeah, if you Google turtle robot, you'll see a bunch of like old robots from like 1979, back when I was a kid. And they were what people did instead of building giant metal things. You typically made them out of a piece of wood, and you put 2 stepper motors on it. And you typically had a big cable, because there was no Wi-Fi. You had a big cable that ran to another computer. That was probably like the size of a, television set, if not bigger. So it's pretty cool. It started out, they were a college thing, then they eventually became a high school thing in the 80s. So all before first.
I'm gonna Google that later.
Yeah, cool.
Moving on to the next question. What educational background do you need for your job? And do you need a higher level degree or certificate or special training? This time, Mr. Daney, can you start?
Sure. So it's kind of a complicated question, I think. So I would say that 95% of what I do day to day is stuff I learned on my own, starting way back, before I took any formal training in university. And so, I mean, to answer the question is, could I do my job without a college education? For me, and I think things are a little bit different now, but 100% yes. And, I work with some guys who are in their 60s who don't have a college education. They're doing very high level computer work and they're very good at what they do. So from that point of view, you need to graduate from college or go to college, probably 40 years ago or 35 years ago. Maybe not. Today, probably a different answer. I think probably if you want to get a job at in the high tech, it's pretty hard to break in unless you have a college degree, I would say. So, but it's not just, I mean, I see what the people, I just keep thinking back to the robot club, what people are, you guys get like a specification from the launch meeting of what it has to do. And, you don't have to go to 4-year college to build a robot and have it, shoot the balls through the thing. You guys, for the most part, the guys on software and everything they're working at a pretty high level and they figured this stuff out without much formal training, but they understand it at a kind of an intuitive level and can get the job done and are good at what they're doing. And that I think carries through. But so I guess I can't give you like a yes or no answer on on it, but that's my take on it.
Yeah, but yeah, I get what you are saying though. Mr. Falkenberg?
Yeah, I've worked with the company that I work for was founded by two college dropouts. So, but that was a different world. That was like 1970, 76, 77. So, um, to work at a big tech company now, a lot of places are going to require a bachelor's degree. Funny thing is that there are paths in that don't involve in getting an engineering degree. Just like FIRST, you don't have to be a fabricator, you don't have to be a programmer to be involved in FIRST. There are plenty of people I know, maybe this is just an Apple thing, but there are plenty of people I know who have like literature degrees or communications degrees or business degrees that came in working in retail. And so while in the technical side, you need a bachelor's degree or a master's degree, college is actually also a lot about making connections and being in the right place so that you can be discovered. Kind of like being on a good first team.
Yeah, the other thing I'll add to that too is the engineering degree you learn in college is kind of a way of thinking about engineering problems and going after them and understanding how to do certain things. So that's a lot of the training as well. And you can pick that stuff up through experience and this type of thing, but yeah.
Practicing in college is a lot better than getting fired in a job.
Yeah.
Because in the real world, if you screw up, there are consequences. So the one thing that's kind of funny, right? Y'all are in school right now. Everybody's like, oh, I don't want to fail. I don't want to fail. This is the time in your life when you have nothing riding. You have a support system. If you want to go big and like, you can totally screw up. Now, okay, if you're trying to go to MIT or trying to go to Harvard, no, you can't screw up. But the way you learn is by making mistakes and making mistakes in a safe way. Like we screw up all the time building robots, right? And we figure out, oh, that didn't work. Why didn't it work? Well, either you go and figure out why it didn't work, or you go off and try something else that does work. And that's thinking like an engineer. Engineers are problem solvers. We will even solve problems that no one wants us to solve. So, and we will keep talking about how we solved the problem that no one cares about. That's a very common thing. If you get married and you talk about all this technical stuff and your wife or your husband or your partner basically says, yeah, I don't really care. Bob, what do you think? He's on mute now.
I think that what you said, Glenn, about a degree, especially a technical degree, kind of giving you a framework for how to solve problems is definitely a useful thing. And like you were saying, Dave, in today's environment, to get a foot in the door, I mean, that's pretty important. And having that diploma is pretty critical for getting a foot in the door. But it is a complicated and nuanced question, like Mr. Daney was talking about. For job recs that I'm involved with, there's always a phrase like, Bachelor of Science or equivalent. And that phrase or equivalent is doing a lot of heavy lifting. I mean, that's kind of the loophole, for people who maybe didn't go through a traditional college route. If you have had a lot of experience, then the doors aren't closed to you, but it's definitely a lot easier if you've kind of gone through this traditional path.
Yeah, I'd agree with that too. And then also, if you look at like how, when you have a rec and you're hiring it for it, the amount of time you spend looking at any one particular resume is very, very small, right? So usually for those who are coming in through those other channels, they have to have some kind of connection saying, hey, this person doesn't have a degree, but I've worked with them before. He's really good. Or, you know, this person she has really excellent experience that's really relevant to what you're doing. And then, you know, but yeah, a lot of times for the bigger companies, if you don't have that degree and you're trying to get in an engineering job, it's almost a non-starter.
Especially early in a career. I mean,
Correct.
Once you've been in a career for a while, then you've kind of naturally, organically built up a lot of those connections that you're talking about. But when you're fresh out of college or fresh, you know, like, you know, an early 20-something, you need every little bit to help, and definitely having a degree is a pretty important one of those.
So what I'm gathering is degrees are mainly important for finding your job, and experience is what actually gets you like the good work.
A really good friend of mine always told me is you can drop out of college and go get a job, but then if that company goes out of business, you want the degree so that when you find that second job, it's not like, oh, this guy dropped out of college and then he was at a failed startup company. Am I going to hire him? Well, at least if he or she went to a really good school, then you've got that to fall back on. So it's a kind of funny little thing. Once you've been working decades, like Bob and Dave and Glenn and I, it is, it's less of a, no one asked me what my GPA was, right? Nobody does. I've been working almost 30 years. They care about what products I've shipped, what my proudest achievements and what my least proud achievements have been. So, but we're all old. You guys are at the other end of the spectrum.
And this, I mean, this is a topic where we could spend for hours on this, because it really is complicated, and talking about the value of a degree versus the value of being in college for 4 years versus, you know, the value of jumping into industry early. I mean, there are a million different permutations of how people have been successful. I would have to say that the you know, if you're rolling the dice, then you want the odds in your favor, and for that you need the paper, and the education is going to kind of help guide how you think throughout your career too.
But more pieces of paper won't guarantee you the job. You've got to work really hard. You've got to be all those things: gracious, curious. I mean, if you're a brilliant, not nice person, I was about to use the wrong word. If you're a brilliant jerk, you know, and you're running your own company, maybe that works, but working with other people, not so much.
Yeah, I think that's one of the key things, especially, I mean, starting out, but all throughout your career, is having the right attitude. Like, hey, you know, especially when you first start off, and I think the same thing applies to the new people for the robotics teams. Like, hey, yeah, go and clean the lab. You know, cleaning the lab is not the funnest thing to do, but everybody needs to do it. And, you know, when you first start off in your career, you might be on things that aren't, you know, the top flagship product, but there are things that need to get done, and you'll get experience, and you'll build up a reputation of somebody who's willing to roll up their sleeves and get the job done.
Okay.
I guess I would add I just wanted to add one more thing. It's maybe my pet subject, but I was going back to what Mr. Nomi kind of said. I mean, the way that certain classes you'll take in college give you like a perspective to like work on a problem a certain way. And people interested in engineering, I think you need to take calculus and calculus-based physics, and you'll really, I think, the concepts you get there really kind of open up a way of like understanding how certain things work that, you know, if you just kind of get into it without having that, I think you may not be, it may not be required in your day-to-day, but I think your understanding of how the processes work is going to be greatly enhanced by some of the training you would get in a university engineering program, for example.
Okay, so now that we've established that universities are relatively important, moving on to the next question. What is your normal day in the workplace before or during COVID? Whoever wants to answer, just go. I'm not going to specify.
Back in the day, a normal day in the office. When I was in shape, I'd go to the gym for 45 minutes to start my day, but that was, a long time ago. I would come in. I would usually spend the first hour. If you go in early in tech, there's not a lot of people around. And I find that you can do all your solitary work, looking at what your incoming, we at work, we used to always run everything off of things called bug reports. So if someone in the world has a problem with, say, the iPhone or a MacBook Air or something, and it ended up being a problem in the area that you were responsible for, the report would come through the system like an email. There's basically a big database. And so you would basically every morning look at, well, what are the bugs? What are the new bugs that the world is telling us about? And then you would, for me as a manager, I would figure out, well, who on my team would want to look at these? Or are these all are these legit? Are they not legit? Are they all the same bug? In which case I dupe them. So that would be like this kind of morning house cleaning. Then there'd usually be an all hands meeting of some sort. If you're all working on a project, there's a morning meeting when everybody kind of arrives that you just kind of get together and have what's called a stand-up meeting. And folks figure out, hey, I need help with this, or I'm running into this problem. Has anybody seen this? And you have a half-hour meeting and you're just identifying what it is you need help with or what you can help with. And then, for a manager, the rest of the day is meetings, bug review boards, and eventually design reviews and one-on-ones, and then preps for executive reviews, follow-ups from debriefs from executive reviews, and the like. And every week there was this whole process by which we would work on understanding what the executive direction for our group was going to be, and then feeding back our progress towards those things by the end of the week. So it's very structured in a weird way and doesn't sound very creative, but from an engineer's perspective, it's a process. And there's kind of a part of it's, the same every day. And then what goes on is, 80% of it is the random stuff that happens that no one was expecting. So that's me.
That's pretty similar to my experience too. Although kind of the ratio of, speaking as an engineer, the ratio of, actual work, which is like the architecting and implementing features, to the meetings, kind of varies depending on what phase of development you're in. And, week to week it varies. Kind of getting into how things work, COVID versus like normal times. In normal times, you have a few scheduled meetings, but you're always running into people, and you're always, even at the cafeteria or grabbing coffee or in the hallway or walking past people's offices. And so you have these organic one-on-one meetings where you can solve problems. And in COVID, it's had to get a little more rigorous, where you have to explicitly set up meetings, which means you lose a lot. You lose a lot of the personal, I guess, because it's always, always business all the time. If you have scheduled a meeting to video conference, you're not just chatting about what you did over the weekend. And that is something that that we've lost. And
Yeah.
I am looking forward very much to regaining that someday.
I actually, COVID was so frustrating for me. I gave up managing over this project. After we shipped the last set of iPhones, the iPhone 12s, I just said, I don't want to manage anymore. I just want to work on technology. So I'm in the process of moving groups to, go do lots of esoteric technology work on things that if they work, everybody's like, yay. Or actually they're like, oh, okay. But if they don't work, everything's like, oh my God, the sky is on fire. So I found that COVID really, just as bad as COVID has affected robotics and the kind of flow and the kind of ambiance and the spontaneity of it, I found that it was harder for me because as a manager, I was only doing video conferences and they were all scheduled, and I had scheduled one-on-ones. And the problem with scheduled one-on-ones instead of informal, hey, how's it going talks, is people have time to get nervous about it because they're like, oh my God, I got a meeting with my manager in an hour and I haven't done anything this week because I've been so frustrated or been so burned out. And so then they get wound up, and then you don't get as much time, and you can't be walking around the hallway saying like, hey, how's it going? Oh, I'm really busy right now. Let's talk later. Okay, cool. Whereas if someone's coding, you don't want to text them like, how's it going? How are your bugs looking? Because then it's exactly the same. It's awful. So it's really hard. It's very weird, right? Y'all are going through remote learning, which also has its ups and downs, right? No one's kicking your chair, but at the same time, like, really, it's like you're watching TV all day long. There's Zoom fatigue and all this other stuff. So, but I'll shut up. I'll let Mr. Daney or Mr. Nomi go.
Yeah, let me add a little bit to, because I just switched jobs, so a lot of what Bob and Dave were just mentioning as far as the conversations in the hallway, and I do know some people that I'm going to be working with. So normally when you start at a company or you switch groups, you go, oh, hey, let's go grab lunch. Let's go figure out and give me the download on what is this team going to be doing? What are some things to watch out for? What are some key things to do and this type of thing. So a lot of that I'm trying to schedule calls with people, and it's just not as natural as being in the office, but obviously everybody's dealing with it. I think a lot of things happen too from the student perspective, right? It's, hey, you might, if you're struggling with a certain class, you might, sit down with one of your friends after class and try and, hey, can you explain this to me or whatever, or even, that a lot of those conversations just don't happen remote, or you have to make more of an effort in order for them to happen.
All right, I guess it's my turn. I'm working, I guess, my day, most of the time writing computer code or like debugging programs or like analyzing failures and things and trying to figure them out. But yeah, I'm still pretty hands-on with what I'm doing. So yeah, when I come in the morning, even, pre-COVID, I would come in, scan through my emails, delete most of them because they're irrelevant, look at some of them if there's something that needs to be done. But typically, I've been working quite a bit in different startups, so there's not a lot of like fixed procedures about what should be done. Like if you're supporting, a product that's massively shipping and there's a few bugs, then it's like very certain what you have to do. I mean, it was said, you have a bug tracking system and it's assigned to you and you get it and you look at it and you figure it out and you try and solve it and then you do the next one. But I mean, I certainly do some of that myself, but also there's a lot of it's like, well, we need the this feature, this thing has to do like this, but nobody's really quite sure exactly how it should be done. So it's like, okay, it's like sit down and prototype it, test it, get some ideas about how it should work, iterate on it a little bit. And it kind of goes back thinking about, I was thinking about this with respect to what, what happens in the robot during build season. And it's like, there's a lot of parallels there with, in my personal work. And so maybe I've never moved out of like my juvenile phase of working on things like this.
I think build season and working in product or working in consumer electronics or working under pressure. I mean, engineers always, if we weren't working under a schedule with economic constraints, we'd just be called scientists.
Yeah, and I guess
engineers are solving problems that are going to make some business person a lot of money. So, and so we're always under a time constraint. We never have enough people. We never have enough time.
Yeah. So, I mean, to say, what is it like post-COVID? Well, it's like, it's actually, the technology of like, the network communication in the last 10 years or something has become good enough that my workflow is essentially the same, but there's all this stuff you guys were talking about. It's like, well, if I have questions or want to BS with somebody about, some approaches we might want to take, you do a little bit of that on Slack, but it's a much more difficult. But, at the same time, I'm actually a little bit amazed that I can like put my phone into Wi-Fi hotspot mode and take the laptop, and it's like using these huge like central services and stuff like interactively remotely over wherever the heck I am, and it's a little bit amazing. But probably today's young people, it's like, of course, it's always been that way. Why wouldn't that just be the way it is?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you guys all, a lot of you, I'm just going to say that in my household, there are people who play a lot of massively multiplayer video games. And so, think about remote learning or remote anything, and it's kind of like that. So there's people you meet in the online gaming world that you'll never meet in real life, which is bizarre, but at the same time, it's kind of like y'all are totally prepped for all of this because you were playing Club Penguin and Minecraft and all that before you were, and your parents were making you stay at home long before everybody else was. So.
Okay. Yeah, this next one's going to be a kind of a follow-up question to the last question. What do you find most enjoyable or fulfilling about your career?
Well, I'll just go since nobody else was talking. So I guess for me, some of the most fulfilling things are solving like a really difficult problem. So, I've been involved in a couple of efforts where it took like months of concentrated analysis and experimentation and running different types of tests and hooking up different kind of crazy instruments to a system to figure out what's happening. And like at the end of the process, when you get to a place where it's like, oh, this is what's happening, that explains it, here's the fix, we can put that in, it feels like I don't know, a pretty big sense of accomplishment to I guess close or root cause like something that was a big problem, find the cause and fix it. So I think for me, that's, I guess, I don't know, it's like I don't know, it's almost like winning a competition if you're in. It's like you're like fighting and fighting, and then you get to the end and it's like, yay, we're done. I feel so good about it.
I think there's a lot of stuff like that. There's a couple different motivations in the STEM careers, right? There's just the adrenaline rush from solving problems. And then there's kind of the social aspects, which can be positive and negative. Like, I got a chance to work on the iPhone. Wow. That like changed the world, changed human life, at least for now. But at the downside of it is there was a year that I didn't know how old John was, because when John turned 4, I said, no, he's 3. And I had spent most of the year John was 3 at work. And so there's this balance, right? So there's this incredible thing you're working on that's changing everything. And, but at the same time, you have to be cognizant of what it is you're doing. I think the holy grail for anything STEM would be like, man, I feel so jealous of the people that invented the COVID vaccine. Because it's like, if you invent the COVID vaccine, it feels like there's nothing but upside. But, you know, it's kind of a cool thing. And that's all the same processes we follow as engineers. Medical doctors, it's just a different process. But the robots that fabricate and synthesize the vaccines are things that mechanical engineers and chemical engineers build, and doctors build, and software people program. And so there's just amazing things. And I know, Bob, you work a lot with photographs and video. So I'm sure you've got some.
Yeah, and I mean, solving a problem and improving the world, these are 2 huge things that are satisfying for me in my career. And let's throw in a third thing, which is working on a team.
Yep.
I mean, it's amazing when you have a group of people with whom you become friends and you solve problems and change the world. I mean, I've seen in the robotics lab, you know, maybe there's a day when there are a lot of dead ends and there's no progress, but everybody is working together and everybody kind of is better friends with each other and is a stronger team because of it. And that is something that that is awesome now in robotics, and it's going to be awesome throughout your career.
Yeah. And when we get back to the old school robotics, right? Hanging out in the lab, seeing that robot move for the first time, seeing drive come up, seeing it shoot the ball or do some sort of game thing, that is a collective shared experience. And you will, just like kids who play high school sports, right? And most of the people who play high school sports, that's as good as they ever get at sports, right? If you look at the Markov chain of how likely it is that you will be the next, you know, NFL star. But what you're doing, you will never forget that. The seniors are going to remember what it was like. The kids who got a chance to go to Houston, I say kids, I mean students and mentors. When we got to go to Houston, that was a sensory experience that, you know, now would totally freak me out, right? If you think of how many people were in one spot, and it's like being in like you know, something from The Mandalorian or like Tatooine or whatever. There's people everywhere, right? And you couldn't even hear, like, you just heard so many different conversations going. It was like sensory overload, but it was amazing. And then as it to the crescendo of like, you know, getting to see the final couple of matches where we're all in a baseball stadium. There's 40,000 people who are down in Houston watching the last match and watching the Cheesy Poops lose. That was amazing. Sorry, that was cheap, but
Yeah, I think the only thing I'll add on to that too is kind of it was mentioned by a few of the other mentors as well. It's just the whole team aspect of it and the people, right? So even when Dave was talking about going to Houston, like if he would have gone to Houston by himself, it wouldn't have been the same experience as going with the people that you've spent, you know, countless hours in the lab working on this robot and working on this. These are your friends. These are people that, you know, if you've sweated over this robot to try and get it to do it, and going through those experiences kind of builds a camaraderie and when things, and later on in your after, people go to college and this type of things, they're going to remember the times they spend in the lab, but they're going to remember the people that they worked with, the people that, that did different things, and just being able to develop those people. And that comes back to also to one of the first, the models of first, right, is that we're not building robots. We're using robots to build people, right, or develop character, right? So it's the same type of thing that happens in industry, right? Is, we've all been through these really tight deadlines and these type of things, and when the team pulls it together, you're like, wow, that was a really cool thing that we did as a team.
So, yeah, I think that covers that question. Last question that we've prepared, and then we'll go on to the viewer questions. Apparently we have like 2. Okay, so question, what advice have you learned being in the workplace, and how can that apply to our robotics team?
I think that there's feedback in both directions. What I've really loved as a mentor and a parent is seeing students start out in freshman year not knowing a lot, but diving in and sweeping the floor, and then moving through the years and gaining some technical skills, improving their technical skills, and building some leadership skills, and kind of becoming teachers. I mean, this is a trajectory that has been really amazing to see, and that's a trajectory that that you'll have probably in every position in your career. You'll have a similar trajectory. Gaining influence as you, whether it's de facto influence as you become a more senior person in your career, or even de jure leadership where you become a manager or something like that. All of these ways of increasing your influence give you opportunities to improve the environment for other people. I mean, just to take a specific example, in our last career panel, we talked about how you can be successful in terms of like being able to be a good multitasker, or be able to absorb distractions. Those are absolutely useful things that you need to do. The flip side of that is, as you gain influence and can influence the environment for others, you can kind of do the opposite, which is reduce distractions for people working around you, and you can reduce the need to multitask. I mean, coming at this from both directions is something that's going to improve teams, and that's something that that you're seeing now, and that's something that through a career, you'll see kind of the same thing. Some of the items that can kind of feed from robotics to the career are things like, Woody Flowers' gracious professionalism. That's something that I've taken to the workplace from robotics, or co-opetition, something where, as an individual on a team, everybody is striving to be the best they can be. They also are cooperating with each other. different teams in a company, same thing. They want to excel and they want to help others around them excel. Same thing for companies. I mean, these are lessons that, like I said, kind of go back and forth and feed on each other. So I don't know if you can say, oh, here is something from a career to apply to robotics, but it all feeds together and it's all, you know, super useful stuff.
All right, I'll go. So I've been thinking about this a little bit. I think any situation you're gonna, well, not any situation, but many situations you'll find yourself in a job. And I think at any level, there are gonna be certain problems that come up that need to be solved. And there's several approaches that can be taken. One is it's like, well, there's like a group of other people who take care of this. So it's like, they're going to be the ones that take care of it. I don't have to do anything. Or it's like, I don't know how to solve the problem. The problem, I don't know what to do with it. And then you could just, if you're the person that solves the problem, like if there's a problem and you're the person that solves the problem, I think that gets recognized in an organization. And so I think if you can approach things like if you're going to be the problem solver, I think there's just a lot of kind of serendipitous things that will open up for you. And there's a former colleague I had who's a pretty high level manager. I was talking to him about it one time, and he said, well, there's, you know, companies have like these org charts. There's like the president and the vice president, and then, you know, different director managers, and then there's this big like tree structure. And then there's also like the de facto ad hoc org chart, which is like in some cases it's like completely different. And it's like, if you're the person who is like the problem solver, if you're a problem solver, you're gonna show up in like the de facto org chart of being like, you're the person that needs to be brought in to like figure out what needs to be done in a certain situation. And I think that's not just like an engineering thing. I think that goes across many different aspects of business and probably just life in general. So I mean, that would be my advice on it, and maybe it's a little hokey, but I think if you're a problem solver, then things will probably work out better than if you're not.
Yeah. So let me, I'll go ahead and chime in a few things that as Dave mentioned, we were given these questions in advance, so I've been thinking about it a little bit. So one kind of comes back a little bit to what Bob was saying around, you know, treating other people, always treating people with respect. And it doesn't matter if you're meeting with the CEO or you're meeting with somebody who sweeps the floor and takes out the trash, right? You can tell when you're walking around with somebody that, you know, that this is somebody that is going to treat people equally. They might have a different opinion than you. And you can see, you know, you can kind of trying to apply this to the robotics team. I mean, it's obvious right now if there's some political differences that people have, you know, and I'm not going to get political on where everybody's standing or anything, this type of thing. We don't have to agree politically, but I respect that you might have a different opinion than me, right? And I don't, like I said, I'm not going to get into opinions on who's on what side of the aisle and that type of thing. But then the way that applies to robotics is, you know, you get some of these powerhouse teams coming in here that, you know, everybody is like, wow, these guys are, you know, they're Citrus Circuits or somebody like that. They're, you know, I'm not going to help them. They know everything, right? But then when Citrus Circuits came in and they built, this device that we thought that a lot of people were going to fail when they did this. So we built some extra and they started handing them out to everybody else. It's helping everybody to be successful, right? So, and then I guess another piece of advice that I was kind of thinking about in preparation for this was, you know, don't be intimidated by the job description or the that you might not know everything about everything when you start a job. You know, Dave, you're just switching jobs right now. Do you know, like, the first, especially when you're first starting out in your career, we talked earlier about, hey, do you need a degree or not? You know, you might check 70% of the boxes of the mandatory requirements, and the rest of it, just go in there with the attitude that I'm going to go in there and learn it. And I'm going to work hard. I'm going to, you know, like I said, roll up my sleeves and do it. And I think the same thing applies to the robotics, right? And when you have a freshman coming in, they don't, you know, maybe they don't know, maybe they don't know anything technically, right? Or they don't know how to code anything. They don't know how to machine anything or build anything, right? And then you look at some of the students when they're seniors, are like, wow, they're doing way cooler stuff than I ever did when I was in high school, or even that I do now. So, you know, go in there with the attitude of learning, and you know, what can you contribute? And yeah.
Okay.
All right, someone needs to unmute Mr. Falkenburg again.
Hey, no worries. Sorry. This is my job, to be the guy who talks on mute. I think that I just want to go back and talk about gracious professionalism again and the two-way street. I recently got a chance to talk at work about what it was like to be a mentor in FIRST Robotics. And with all the pressure and with all of the various things, it pushes folks to their limits in terms of their patience. And the way that I kind of came back from the brink of being super frustrated was remembering that me being angry at myself, or me being angry at other people, or me being a generally ornery guy was not going to help anything. And I kept thinking, like, well, if I was in robotics, would I be a jerk about, would I be a big of a jerk about this as my bad habits at work might have told me to be? No, I wouldn't. I wouldn't expect a 17-year-old kid or a 16-year-old kid to understand something. I would be patient. And then I started realizing that some of the junior engineers that I work with, I'm like old enough to be their dad. They're like 3 years older than Kyle, right? And I was like, man, no, I now get why I could be this intimidating old guy with the gray beard who seems grumpy all the time. And I took that to heart, and all of a sudden doors started opening again. And instead of being the tactical guy that gets brought in to blow something up, which was my you know, one of my calling cards, I'm now a bridge builder. So I'm going in, and I'm going into meetings where people are yelling at each other, and I am coming in and saying, like, well, wait a minute, I think there's more going on here that's in common than not. And everybody's just upset because they don't want to be the team that's blamed because we're late. Well, we're all late, so everybody gets to share the blame. Let's talk about what each team can do. And these are things that I learned from watching students, Woody Flowers, Dean Kamen, all the first stuff. Because you don't, if you grew up in the company that I grew up with, which was a crazy startup version of Apple, people were really mean to each other. People always talk about the good old days of Silicon Valley. People were very brutal. And there's still vestiges of that in tech. There's still walls, there's still discrimination. It's still not a very comfortable place for women to work in tech, despite the big things. And there's a lot of work to be done. And I realize how important it was for me to see and then be involved in FIRST to then get a fresh set of eyes when I was back at work. So it's more to that two-way street. And yeah, it's life-changing.
Well, I'm glad that us kids were able to teach you so much. Yeah, that about covers it for the questions that we prepared. We've got a couple questions from the viewer, so I'm just going to be asking that and letting you guys talk. Okay, the first question is, what are some of your tips for successful job interviews, and what strategies have you used?
So I'll start with that since I just got done interviewing. I was interviewing through like the months of October, November, and December. So number one is do your homework, right? So you should know what the role is. You should know something about the company. You should do whatever research that you can so that there's some common interview questions that people get tripped up on. I've been on both sides of, I've just got done interviewing and I've interviewed quite a few different people. You'll ask them simple question, describe one of your biggest accomplishments. And you see people struggle on stuff like that. Like man, do your homework, number one. And then number two is, just be honest, right? Be yourself, right? You don't want to portray it's like going into a relationship, whether it's a dating relationship or a work relationship. You want to be, and the job interview is a two-way discussion, right? You're trying to decide if this company is the right next move for me. The company's trying to decide if you're the right person for the role. So if you're not honest and being your feedback, it's deceptive to everything. So those would be my kind of two big things: is be prepared. There are some softball questions that I've seen people trip up on.
So I just did interviews to switch groups. So reiterating, be yourself. Don't try to be what they want. Be yourself. Mm-hmm. Don't lie. Oh my God!
Never ever
as a guy who's interviewed
yeah.
people at a big company, it is very clear when someone has misrepresented their experience on their resume. Don't say that you're an expert at some thing that no one is an expert on. Be very, like I said, be honest. Don't lie. Be yourself. If don't try to fake it in the interview, right? If you just the whole desperation thing, right? What an employer is going to look for is integrity, enthusiasm, and fit. And mm-hmm. Sometimes you're not the right guy or gal for this job, but if you come across and leave a good impression, someone will be like, hey, we talked to somebody a couple weeks ago that I think might be a better fit over here. And sometimes you'll get a call back. It's a little bit like auditioning, right? If you're good, you're good. If you're good, you can't fake being good if you're not good. So be yourself.
That was solid advice from both Glenn and Dave. One of the biggest hang-ups, at least for interview loops that I've been in, has been kind of the nervousness of being there. And the last time that I was on the job, well, like ages ago, I was on the job seeking side of the interview. And then at my last job, I was on the other side of the table. And just to throw this out there, kind of if you're on the job seeking side of the table, your worst case scenario is that you're going to waste a day and maybe get a free lunch. For somebody sitting on the job hiring side of the table, the worst case scenario is that you will get stuck with somebody terrible who you can't get rid of because it's hard to fire people. Now, that's not like a super cheery perspective, but it does mean that if you're on the job seeking side of the table, you really have reason to kind of be relaxed.
And eat as many lunches as you can.
Actually, that's a good point. Job interviewing is a practice skill. So even if it's a role that you're maybe not 100% interested in, especially early in your career, go to the job interviews and get used to asking, because a lot of the questions will be the same. So
Just like doing robotics. Robotics, the more experience we get driving the robot, the better we get at driving the robot. The more competitions you do, the better you get at competitions, ignoring breaking robots and all that. You know, it's super uncomfortable it's super uncomfortable for everybody, and anybody who says it isn't uncomfortable is lying.
Right.
Although there's some narcissists who actually get off on it, but most people, it is the worst thing to have to be in a room or across a Zoom call on a screen for 45 minutes with an abject stranger that is lying to you or is just a dead fish, right? If it's not working, don't try to force it. So, I don't know.
Yeah, I would just, I think Mr. Falkenburg said this, or maybe someone else, but yeah, if you put stuff on your resume that says like you have experience with a certain thing, or it's like that you don't have experience with, there's a good chance the person you're interviewing with, the reason they picked your resume is it's like, oh, well, it looks like this is interesting experience. And there's also a good chance that they know way more about it than you can possibly imagine. And so, yeah, it's not at all a comfortable situation to talk to somebody and ask them. It's like, oh, well, tell me about this thing that you say you're an expert in. And then they'll just like, and it's like, why are you wasting my time? So I guess you don't want to end up in a situation like that. So I think you need to, yeah, it may seem like a good idea at first. It's like, oh, if I say I have the experience exactly what they're looking for, then they'll like interview me. But that it's not going to get you very far.
Yeah.
I'm going to tell you one other hack that's actually pretty good. Since I have had such a positive experience over the last 3 years with First, I now look for First on people's resumes. If someone is their volunteer says, oh, I'm a First mentor, or I was on the Solar Core team in college, or I was, did this, or I did this in high school, if they're that young. I never see that lately. But if someone calls out something that we share in common, it also is an icebreaker when you're in the interview to talk about something that you might share a common interest with the interviewer. So, if you're both into robotics, that's cool. If you're not really into robotics, don't put it on there. Although you probably wouldn't be on the Zoom call if you weren't. So.
Okay, this is a relevant question that came up. What are some red flags that convinced you a company wasn't right for you?
I could tell a funny story about crazy stuff. A red flag is I was interviewing in the 90s at a company that said that they were on the cutting edge of personal electronics and healthcare. And the first interview was really awesome. They were building, handheld computers for doing medical diagnosis. And then they said, oh, well, we'll call you back in a month for the next interview. And the next interview, it was a different, they started off the same way. And then they said, yeah, well, we're really not doing that. We're instead building computers that'll be carried by soldiers. And then the third interview, because it was still very cool, the third interview, the thing that was the red flag to me was when they said, well, if you agree to sign this offer letter, then you're subject to a background check, and there may be agents from our government or other governments that you might see following you around for the next 90 days. And go to SRI, and you need to give an industrial blood sample. And I came home from that third interview, and my wife was like, that's too creepy. And I'm like, yeah, it seemed really cool, but it was over the line for me. So that's where the line is for me, having to give an industrial blood sample because you were learning you were going to be working with toxic nerve agents and biological things like, bird flu and other stuff. It was crazy. So I can't talk about what it was, but it was very crazy. And for me, it wasn't right.
Yeah, I've never been asked to give blood during a job interview process, so that's definitely a new one, and that would definitely be a red flag. So I think I'll go back to the thing I mentioned earlier about kind of lessons learned and treating people with respect, and seeing that, like when you're interviewing with somebody or looking at the company, or a lot of times you're going to grab lunch with somebody as part of the interview process. If you're not seeing that person is treating you with respect and treating the people, like the people serving them food in the cafeteria, with respect,
Yeah,
that's
red flag.
something that it doesn't bode well to how that relationship is going to be.
That's a great point. It's something that Dave mentioned earlier, is that in an interview, everybody is nervous, and it's a high tension situation for everybody. And if you have like a normal, if you're not in HR, then your normal job is not doing interviews all the time. So it's like, it's a disruption to do a hiring interview loop. But that means that if things kind of go awry, and you are the job seeker, and your interviews keep getting rescheduled, that means that the company is not putting the appropriate priority on the interview process. And that, for me, that has been a huge red flag.
Two other things in the other direction, as an interviewer or an interviewee. Okay, there's being casual, and then there's like joking about everything, right? Because a lot of people cope with being nervous by joking, and there are people that do not respond to someone cracking jokes. Like, we're not all dads, where we would appreciate that and the craftsmanship of the perfect dad joke in every situation. But inappropriate humor, and I don't mean like sexist humor, I just mean like humor when it's not expected, is a real turnoff for some people, because they're like, oh, they're really nervous. They're trying to mess with me because they're telling me a joke, or they're trying to catch me off guard, or they're trying to redeflect. The other thing that I have done, and Mr. Clark and Mr. Nomi would know this, and because they knew me when I was a much younger mentor, swearing is a huge no-no in job interviews. Even if so working at Apple 20 years ago, there was no avoiding swearing, except, in engineering groups, we swore like sailors, as they used to say. Not to say that sailors swore that much, but when I then went and interviewed at a company later, I was taking that kind of cavalier attitude to how I was saying, and that I saw someone get visually like upset about it. Now, maybe going meta, they might have been trying to like see if I was cognizant of that, but at the same time, just don't go there.
Yeah,
So,
I think that comes back to being like too casual about the
yep.
whole process, and not respecting that other person. You don't know. Yeah, they might be totally fine with swearing, or they might be completely offended by it, and you just don't know that.
You'll never go wrong by omitting swearing.
Exactly.
Right. Well, and
Yeah.
and if you find that a prospective employer is making kind of like racial jokes or sexist jokes, just get up and go.
Yeah, that's
If
not appropriate at all. Yeah.
Yeah. So those are red flags.
Mm-hmm.
Or if you're a girl or a guy, and the interviewer seems to be flirting with you, red flag. It's just not appropriate. So, since we're talking red flags.
Well,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, that's also illegal too. Actually.
It's illegal, but it doesn't mean it doesn't happen.
Exactly the case, right? It's the same thing we were talking about earlier about like, increasing diversity and that type of thing. It's yeah, it still happens in the workplace, unfortunately.
I don't really have much more to add. I can just maybe, the only thing that came to my mind is an anecdote. Is one day, this happened a while ago, but I was interviewing a guy and he took his shoes off and put his feet up on the table right in front of me and leaned back in his chair. I'm going. So I think you don't, I guess if you go to a job interview, probably not a good idea to do that. That's not going to come across as professional.
You laugh. Was the person from Waterloo? Just trying to figure out if it's the same person that did it to us. There was a guy who was being funny with my whole old team. And he would always compliment everybody on their shoes with the intent that he wanted them to notice that he wasn't wearing any. So that was a little too meta.
It's a little too.
So don't be weird. I mean, it's okay to be weird if that's you, but don't think it is not going to be a turnoff for somebody.
Well, I'll make sure to wear shoes to my job interview.
If that's the one thing that you pull away from this, it will be well worth it.
Yep.
30 years ago was always keep your clothing on. I had a friend who worked at SCO, the Santa Cruz operation, which is a Unix company. It's a terrible lawsuit farm now. But they had a hot tub. And one of the things that they would do in the hot tub is they would all jump in the hot tub at the end of the interview. Clothing optional hot tub. Boy, yikes. That was nuts. So, just awful.
So 2021 isn't as terrible as all that then, huh?
No, not at all.
Yep, those seem to be the takeaways.
Yep.
Yeah, it's been going on for a while, and there's a little more viewer questions, but it's also kind of late, and I don't want to draw you guys too much, so I think we're gonna end here. Thank you all for coming. Thanks all the mentors for being here and answering questions, and see you guys next time.
Thank you, Yuta.
Keep your shoes on.
Yeah, thank you, everybody.
Hey, goodbye.
Bye.
Thank you.